This video explains what is prophesied for France, Ireland, Switzerland, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries in the very near future. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. The Jews are not the only descendants of the patriarch Jacob, whose other name was Israel. He had 12 sons who were the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Jews are primarily the descendants of the tribe of Judah, though they have a lot of the tribe of Levi and a few of the tribe of Benjamin mixed in them. The Jews received the promise of the scepter, meaning the ruler's staff or promise of kingship. That promise continues to be fulfilled in the British royalty. The Americans and the Britons are descendants of Joseph's two sons, the British being descendants of the younger son Ephraim, and Americans being descendants of the elder son Manasseh. Joseph's descendants were the recipients of the promise of the birthright, meaning a double portion of the material blessings. The French are descendants of Jacob's eldest son Reuben, whereas the Irish, Swiss, the Scandinavians, and the Benelux countries are descended from the other tribes of Israel. God calls them all his people collectively in the Bible. Now, God had promised incredible material blessings to descendants of Israel if they obeyed his laws and curses if they disobeyed, including defeat in war and national slavery. Those blessings and curses are recorded in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. Clearly, the descendants of Israel are disobeying God's laws, for which they will receive punishment, as they show no inclination to repent. Since the descendants of Joseph and Judah received the greatest blessings, with Joseph receiving the birthright promise and Judah receiving the scepter promise, they will also receive the greatest punishment, which will be defeat in war and national slavery for 3.5 years. The descendants of the other tribes will also be punished with terrible war, but they will not be defeated and enslaved, though many will lose their lives defending themselves. For full understanding of what is prophesied soon ahead for the world, you may wish to read my ebook, World and Bible Prophecy, available free of charge on my website, www.churchofgodmessage.com. So what is prophesied for France, Ireland, Switzerland, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries in the very near future? I would like these countries to understand the prophecies concerning them so that they can make decisions that will be best for their preservation through the global catastrophes the world will be soon facing. The next prophesied event is the Third World War, orchestrated by Germany and its allies on the United States, British Commonwealth nations, the State of Israel, and unfortunately the Sikhs in the Punjab state of India. I am a former Sikh who converted to Christianity 46 years ago. A lot of human beings will lose their lives in this war and its aftermath of famines and diseases. These events will eventually lead to the military defeat of these Israelite nations at the hands of the German-led alliance and their enslavement. The German-led alliance that will defeat the American, British, and Jewish alliance is called the Seventh Resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire in Europe. It is also called Babylon the Great in prophecy. It is a European alliance consisting of the nations that comprise the European Union of today. A great question is whether France and the other European nations descended from the tribes of Israel will be part of this alliance. Indications are that some will definitely be part of the European alliance. They will be sucked into the war because of their being part of the European Union. Now Revelation 18 verses 1 to 6 state, "And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great, or the European alliance, or the seventh resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, that Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Spiritual fornication means adopting false religion. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Then, verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues or punishments. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she has rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she has filled, fill to her double. This is talking about the Holy Roman Empire. God warns his people, meaning the descendants of the tribes of Israel, in verse 4. Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. The Holy Roman Empire, or Babylon the Great, receives God's plagues during the events of the day of the Lord, which is the last 1 year of the 3.5 years long Great Tribulation, when God punishes all those who follow the religion of the Holy Roman Empire or the Roman Church. God needs to warn his people to come out of her because some are prophesied to be part of the Holy Roman Empire. Therefore, indications are that some of the countries among the tribes of Israel, which are France, Ireland, Switzerland, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries, will be part of the German-led alliance that wars with the American, British, and Jewish alliance. It appears that the actual fighting will be done by the Islamic countries supported by Germany, as indicated by Psalm 83 verses 1 to 8, in addition to other alliance partners of the Germans. Here are what the verses state. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you. The Germans certainly hate the God of the Bible, being Satan worshippers. And those who hate you, they have taken crafty counsel against your people, meaning Israel, and that is America and British Commonwealth nations, and Judah, meaning the Jewish state of Israel and the other tribes of Israel, and against your sheltered ones, which is God's small true church. They have said, Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you, the tents of Edom, whose descendants are most of the Turks and the Palestinians. The tents of Edom, Ishmaelites, etc., means that individuals from Muslim nations and others, but not the entire nations, will join them as mercenaries. And continuing, and the Ishmaelites, who are the Arabs, Moab, which are the southern parts of Jordan, and the Hagrites, meaning the Syrians, Gebal, that is Lebanon, Ammon, the northern parts of Jordan, and Amalek, a branch of Edomite Palestinians, some of whose descendants may be living in Central Asia. Philistia, meaning the Gaza Strip, with the inhabitants of Tyre, meaning southern Lebanon or the Hezbollah. Assyria, meaning their modern descendants, Germany, also has joined with them. They, that is the Germans, have helped the children of Lot, meaning Moab and Ammon and Jordan. Now, once the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and the State of Israel are defeated, nations among France and the other northwestern European Israelite nations that are part of the European Union will automatically become part of the seventh resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. They will not lend any support or participate in defending the United States, Britain, and Israel. The reason is that they will be too scared for their own safety, as indicated by Revelation 13 verses 3 to 4. And I saw one of the heads, that is the beast's heads. The beast refers to the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, as it were wounded to death, This refers to the Roman Empire after it was originally destroyed in 476 AD, and his deadly wound was healed after it was resurrected by Justinian in 554 AD. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, meaning Satan the devil, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So that is the reason why all the nations of Israel will be scared of trying to defend, of lending any support to defend the United States, Britain, and Israel. The Germans and their allies possess such weapons that all nations will be scared of opposing them in war. Germany and China may already possess such weapons, as indicated by their ability to bring down passenger airliners and an Indonesian submarine using directed energy weapons and not missiles. But the Germans will double cross France and the other Israelite nations by simply clandestinely encouraging the Islamic and African countries to attack them. Satan hates all Israelites because of all people they resist him the most and know the true God better than anybody. Therefore, his agents, the Germans, will target them for destruction no matter what actions they take. The descendants of the other tribes of Israel are mentioned in prophecy as the house of Israel. That is what they were called when the northern 10 tribes split from the kingdom of Judah. Prophecy about them is given in Ezekiel 5 verses 1 to 4. And you, son of man, take a sharp knife, like a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon your head and upon your beard. Then take balances to weigh and divide the hair. You shall burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city, when the days of the siege are fulfilled. And you shall take a third part and smite about it with a knife, and a third part you shall scatter in the wind. And I will draw out a sword after them. You shall also take thereof a few in number, and bind them in your skirts. Then take of them again, and cast them into the midst of the fire, and burn them in the fire. For thereof shall a fire come forth into all the house of Israel. The last part of verse 4 mentions all the house of Israel. This applies to the rest of the Israelite tribes whose descendants live in France, Switzerland, Ireland, the Scandinavian countries of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and Finland, and Benelux countries of Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. God says that fire will go out to these descendants of Israel. What causes this fire to go out is described in verse 3. Here Ezekiel was asked to take some of the hair of his head and beard and bind them in his skirts, indicating some of the Israelites will be protected when the beast defeats them. Then God says, take some of those that are protected and throw them in the fire to burn them. This is a dual prophecy. It applies to the physical Israelites as well as the spiritual Israelites, meaning God's true church. Concerning God's church, this prophecy indicates that members of God's church will be protected, but not all of them. Those who are lukewarm will be thrown into the fire of the great tribulation and burned. Some of these lukewarm members will be in the Israelite countries of the house of Israel, meaning France, Scandinavian, Benelux countries, and Ireland and Switzerland, excluding the United States and Britain and Israel. The beast and the false prophet, meaning the Pope, will ask these countries to give up these members of God's church. That is what will cause the fire or war to go out into these countries. In addition, some of the Israelites, meaning United States, Britain, and the Jews, may escape to these countries, those that were symbolically bound in Ezekiel's skirts when the beast alliance attacks them. The final battle that defeats the United States, Britain, and Israel lasts 30 days. That is the time some could escape to France and other Israelite countries of Europe. The beast will ask them to give up these few Israelites along with members of God's true church, but they will likely refuse. Actually, the French, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries will have to make a decision, whether to give up the Israelites to the Islamists and Germans or not. Most likely they will make the right decision and not give them up. Now, France, Scandinavian, Benelux countries should know that the attack against them will be directed by Satan because he hates all Israelites. So, no matter what they decide, whether to give up their brothers to who come to their countries to escape or not, they will still be targeted by the Islamists at the instigation of the Germans to fulfill the prophecy in Ezekiel 5, verse 4, that a fire will come forth into all the house of Israel. Therefore, it will be to their advantage to not give up the Americans and Britain and the Jews among them, because they will have more people available for the terrible 2.5 years of the war ahead for them against the Islamics and Africans. I base my interpretation of France, Benelux, Scandinavian, other countries' decision to give shelter to the fleeing British and American and the Jews based on Ezekiel 7 verse 16, which state, "And they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be on the mountains like doves of the valleys, all of them mourning, every one for his iniquity." So besides escaping to actual mountains, the word mountain in prophecy means a large nation, whereas a hill means a small nation. That is why I believe France and perhaps Benelux countries will give shelter to the fleeing Britons, Americans, and the Jews. The sequence of end time events, therefore, concerning these nations of France, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries, and Ireland and Switzerland is the following. First, after the American, British, and Jewish alliance is defeated by the German led European, Islamic, African, and global alliance and its population enslaved, the world will be too scared to oppose the German led alliance. Secondly, most likely the German dictator will then divide Europe, that is, allied with him, into 10 territories and appoint rulers over them. Quite likely some, not necessarily all, just some of the Israelite nations of Europe among France, Ireland, Switzerland, Benelux, and Scandinavian countries will be included in this division of territories. To fulfill the prophecy, it is not necessary that all these nations be ruled by the European dictator. So these 10 rulers will give total allegiance to the German dictator. This is indicated by Revelation 17 verses 12 to 14. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour, that means a very short time, with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, meaning Jesus Christ, after he returns to earth, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Thirdly, the German dictator will then direct his Islamic African alliance partners to war against and bring down France and other northwestern European nations. A fierce war will rage on for 2 full years, but France and the European nations will not be defeated, though they will incur huge loss of life and property. The 2-year duration of this war is indicated by Hosea 6 verses 1 to 2. "Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he has torn, and he will heal us. He has smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, in prophecy a day equals a year. After 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up, that we shall live in his sight." So continuing in verse 4. No, the fourth sequence of events is, after 2.5 years of the Great Tribulation, the catastrophic events of the day of the Lord are about to begin. This is the last chance for those Israelite nations who have given their allegiance to the beast to repent and come out of the Babylonian system as admonished in Revelation 18 verse 4. "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues." If the Israelite nations do not pay heed to this warning, They will then suffer all the wars and plagues that lie ahead for humanity during the day of the Lord, which is the last 1 year of the Great Tribulation. Fifth event in the sequence of events is that it seems the high-handedness of the German dictator in keeping most of the spoils of victory over the American, British and Jewish alliance will cause the Islamic African alliance to consider breaking up their alliance. They will take some provocative actions 2 years after the defeat of the American, British and Jewish alliance and continue for about 6 months, which will invite an attack and retaliation as described in Daniel 11 verses 40 to 43. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, meaning Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, meaning Turkey, and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon, meaning Jordan. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. The forces of the Islamic African Alliance are defeated in this attack with huge loss of life. Then the sixth item in sequence of events is that while the Islamic African Alliance was planning rebellion against the German dictator, nations in the east had also started making preparations for war with the beast. As soon as they saw the kings of the north and south start fighting, kings of the east will begin mobilizing their armies. The German dictator, king of the north, then reacts as indicated in Daniel 11 verses 44 to 45. But tiding means news out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to take away many. And he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain of Jerusalem. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now, details of what transpires next can be found in my free ebook Word and Bible Prophecy, available at www.churchofgodmessage.com. But briefly, this is what happens. The German dictator makes a preemptive strike against the Eastern Alliance with biological and chemical weapons. The East retaliates with similar weapons. The whole world feels the terrible effects of these weapons. Humans will go through such pain and suffering for 5 months that they will desire death, but the weapons will not kill them. Then the eighth in the sequence of events is that the kings of the East attack the German dictator and Europe with a 200 million man army. This war destroys 1/3 of the world's population. Now, when the nations are contemplating using all their nuclear weapons which would destroy all life from Earth, Jesus Christ will return to intervene in human affairs to stop mankind from annihilating itself. And the 10th, the nations then gather at Armageddon, the hill of Megiddo, to attack Jesus Christ at Jerusalem. They move to Jerusalem for the attack, but all the armies are totally destroyed. The nations are also punished with the greatest earthquake in the history of mankind and hail with hailstones weighing 100 pounds. Both events will kill a lot of human beings. And the 11th point, nations then submit to Jesus Christ and he establishes God's kingdom on earth. These prophecies indicate that France, Ireland, Switzerland, Benelux and Scandinavian countries will have very critical decisions to make in the very near future on how they will deal with the British, American and Jewish people, particularly after they are defeated in war and enslaved. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channels and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. You can also find the text of my videos on my Facebook channel. Unfortunately, YouTube does not give me the facility to put the text of my videos online, but Facebook does, and that is why I am adding the text of my videos on the Facebook channel.